Hey everybody, welcome back to Econ 145 Bootcamp, a video series designed to help you prepare and get through Econ 145 with some supplements and some additional information, anything you might need clarification on, and some things that I feel like students tend to have the most questions about. So today we are going to talk about finding a hypothesis. And this is key to 145 because the whole point is that you are going to test a testable hypothesis within the field of economics. And the good news and the bad news is that everything is economics. So I always tell students, or I really truly believe, that we can turn pretty much any question into an economics question as long as we can break it down to incentives and scarcity, because those are those two big economic concepts that underlie all of our theories, right? How do individuals and other actors, firms and states and countries deal with scarcity, and how do they respond to incentives? So if there's something that you're interested in, like sports, music, the environment, we have an economics subfield for that because it gets down to choices, incentives, and scarcity. How to pick a hypothesis is a little bit more challenging in that what you want to do with your hypothesis is you want to find a testable question that you think you know the answer to. And that's the way I like to think of a hypothesis. It's something that is a question about how a factor or set of factors affect another thing, actor, individual, firm, environment, and you want to make a statement about the nature of that relationship, the causal relationship of that, and the nature of that relationship. And what we do in economics is we mathematize our ideas. And so if you think that higher gas prices is going to have an effect on electric vehicle sales, there's a causal relationship implied there, right? The gas prices go up. And there's this mechanism in between of higher gas prices mean people want to move away from those high gas prices, so they select vehicles that are less reliant on gasoline and buy electric vehicles. That's the mechanism. And so we mathematize that by saying, okay, there is something I want to measure the effect of, and that's my independent variable. I want to measure the effect of my independent variable on my dependent variable. So in that case, it would be, I want to measure the effect of gas prices on electric vehicles sales, right? And so that's what we do when you take your hypothesis and formalize it. You want to be able to mathematize it and say, okay, I've got this independent factor, in this case, gas prices, causing electric vehicle sales. And what you do when you generate a hypothesis is you say, not only is there a relationship between these two things, but I'm going to measure the relationship, and I'm going to make a statement about the nature of that relationship. And the nature of that relationship is defined here in the coefficient that our statistical software is going to estimate. So whether you're using Excel or Gretel or Stata or whatever, or eViews, whatever statistical software package you're using, it's going to estimate the value of this coefficient. So if gas prices go up by 50 cents, how much is that going to affect electric vehicle sales? If beta is 1, then an increase of 50 cents is going to have a 1-to-1 effect on vehicle sales. So we don't know what the effect is going to be. We don't know what beta is going to be until we collect data and analyze it, but we can make some estimates. We can say whether there is an effect, right? We're going to make a comment about, yes, there is a causal effect, and then we can say whether it's a positive effect or a negative effect. And that is pretty simple too. Do we think higher gas prices is going to have a positive effect on e-vehicle sales or a negative effect? Conventional wisdom can give us that. Conventional wisdom and economic theory help us explain this relationship. And so you can rely on your own conventional wisdom and the economic theory that you've absorbed over your years of classes, your core classes, your 100A, 100B, your intermediate micro and macro, your intro micro and macro, but also your elective classes should be helping you here, because your elective classes are going to give you an idea of how we can apply those basic core models to more realistic real-world situations. And if you feel like you don't have a firm grasp on that, but you have a loose sense of what you want to do, don't worry. That's what the literature review is designed to do, because the literature review tells you, hey, okay, now that I have this idea, this hypothesis, this X causes Y to move in a certain direction, you go and you read what other people have done, and they'll tell you what their data and their research have said. Does that make sense? So when you want to pick a hypothesis, you want to pick a hypothesis that does three things. You want your hypothesis to be practical in the sense that you can complete this project in the time allotted. We don't have a lot of time in Econ 145. We have 15 weeks to complete the literature review, collect the data, test the data, write up all of our results, and then present it. And so you don't have a ton of time. You want to move quickly. For a hypothesis to be feasible, to be completable within the amount of time we have, it has to be something where you can find the data you need. So you have to be able to get the data for this subject, and your professors will be able to help you answer that question. And usually a quick Google search can help. There's a ton of data out there. And there's also a lot of data that's not out there. And so that's one of the questions you have to ask yourself. Can I find this data? So you want your hypothesis to be feasible, number one. I can do it in 15 weeks. The data is available. I understand the question and the economics well enough to answer that question, that kind of stuff. If you weren't sure, always ask. You can always ask, right? And then you'll know. So we want our hypothesis to be feasible. We want it to be interesting, especially to you. You want it to be interesting. Don't pick GDP growth and interest rates if you think interest rates are the dullest thing in the world, like I do. I'm not a macro person. There's some macro stuff that's super, super cool. But to me, when I get interested, it's going to be micro stuff. And so that's what I'm the most comfortable with, the models I know the best, the hypotheses I like the most. So if I were to pick a research project, I'd pick something in that realm. So hopefully you pick something feasible, something interesting. And then the next level, if you want to do something really cool, is you want to try and innovate, do something different from what other economists and scientists who've come before you have done. That is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that your hypothesis is feasible and testable, but it's nice if it's also original and interesting. Does that make sense? So original and interesting is the icing on the cake. Feasible and economically testable, those are the most important things. And so when you have an economic hypothesis, a testable, feasible hypothesis, it's going to say something like, I believe, or I posit, or the relationship, I'm going to write this out because I believe it's really important, the relationship between, oops, I'm not writing between well. The relationship between X and Y is causal and either positive or negative. And that's what your hypothesis is, right? Your hypothesis is that there's some X and some Y. You believe X causes Y, and the effect is either positive or negative. And don't get bogged down by this, right? This is stuff you intuitively know. If I ask you what the effect of one of my favorite papers a student did was looking at building permits and regulations around housing and home prices. And so that seems really big and esoteric maybe, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe you can think about it clearly and just break it down. Okay, if we increase regulations around housing, does it make it easier or harder to build houses? Harder. That's a negative effect. More building permits, it's harder to build houses. If it's harder to build houses, what happens to housing supply? Does it go up or down? Down, right? If it's harder to build houses, there are going to be fewer of them. If there are fewer of them, as an economist, you know restricting housing supply is going to drive prices up. So now you know that building restrictions, X, is going to have a causal relationship on home prices, Y, and it's going to be negative. As this goes up, this goes, nope, it's going to be positive. As restrictions go up, the prices go up. right? Supply goes down, prices go up. So that's what you want to think about, is that mechanism and that causal relationship, and whether it's positive or negative. And not everyone feels as strongly about this, but that's my belief, is that your hypothesis, when you put your hypothesis together, you should take a stand and say, I believe it's going to go this direction, because that's what you're testing. If you come out and it's the opposite direction, that's cool. That's science. That's a negative result that tells you, okay, it's not the way I thought it would be. It's not the way the economic model told me it would be. There's probably a reason for that. But that's what a testable hypothesis does. It asserts a causal relationship between two variables, and it says whether it's going to be a positive relationship or a negative relationship. So think about a topic or a general area you're interested in, right? Maybe you're really interested in education, K through 12 education. Maybe you're really interested in interest rates. Maybe you're really interested in economic growth, or in, I have a friend who does all of her research on, I forgot the word, corruption, international corruption, and its effect on GDP and global stability. Whatever you're interested in, that's the topic, right? That general area, environment, sports, athlete salaries, something like that. And then you break it down into a testable hypothesis by answering the question, how does race affect athlete compensation in the NBA? I think that race affects it positively or negatively, right? Take a stand in your hypothesis and say, I believe that X is going to have an effect on Y that looks like this. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. Hopefully it gives you a sense of what we're looking for in a hypothesis. Again, something testable, something feasible, something interesting, and hopefully something that what we say is contributes to the literature, right? Adds something new that wasn't there before. But the most important thing is that it's feasible. So let me know what questions you have. Go out there and do some digging around. Think about what economics electives that you've taken were interesting, what models you liked, what questions you have about the way the world's working right now, and then see if there's some data that you could get on it. And that's really the first couple of steps you want to take. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you all next time.